Hello and thank you for joining me for another video. Now you may notice this one's a little bit more close up, and that's because we're going to be talking about monocles. So I thought if it was a little bit closer then you could probably see me wear it a little bit better. So if you're an antiques collector, if you're an antiques fan, if you're just interested in learning more about antiques, if you're doing a school paper on Victorian eyewear, or if you're just down that weird YouTube video rabbit hole, stay tuned because I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know, or probably don't need to know because why would you, about monocles. So for those of you who don't know, a monocle is a single corrective lens worn in just one eye. It can be for distance or it can be for reading. What's that? You want to hear the uninteresting history of the monocle, sir? So it's said that in the 1720s in Rome there was a man called Philip von Stosch, I hope I'm saying that right, who was an antiquarian, and he would use it to look at antiques, and he'd use it to see engravings and all that kind of stuff. So much like you would use a loupe today if you were analysing antiques. Then in the 1790s you have what's called a quizzing glass came into fashion. So that was on a lanyard. It looks a lot like a monocle, but it's not worn in the eye. It has a handle and you basically just hold it up to look. So back then there was still like a stigma with disability and all that kind of stuff, so you wouldn't really want to be wearing something that obviously made it look like you had an impairment. So if you just held it up to read something, you know, that looked nice, that looked elegant, that looked discreet, so they preferred that. So then if you fast forward to the Victorian era, you've got all kinds of different types of eyewear. So you've got glasses like these, which would just hook around the back of the ear here, so you can sit them on like that. You've also got the pince-nez here, so these would sit just on the end of your nose here, and you could also use these for reading. And obviously the monocle was popular, so you would pop that in your eye and you could read. Now in the Victorian era, monocles looked a little bit different. So monocles in the Victorian era would have looked like this. They wouldn't have had a gallery at all. As you can see, it's just a gold rim with a lens on it. It has a screw, then it has a little loop here, and then you can attach your lanyard or your chain. So the way this one would work is that you see there's a machined edge, so it's slightly so it's like kind of like serrated, but it's just so that it gives a little bit more grip. So how you would wear this one is you would first of all you'd tilt it, you'd put it onto your cheekbone here, you'd push it sort of towards your nose here, and then you would catch it with your eyebrow like that, so it would stay in your eye and you could read. So this is really good, right, because you can read and then you can put it in your pocket. It doesn't take up much space. It's almost as flat as like a credit card today, so it doesn't take up much space at all. It takes up much less space than pince-nez or glasses would. But the thing is, what happened was, towards the end of the Edwardian period, into the 20s and the 30s as well, eyewear became super fashionable. Like people wanted loads of different styles and people wanted to wear it a lot more. If you look at politicians, for example, Joseph Chamberlain is always pictured with a monocle. It was his kind of like trademark. It's like his fashion statement of the time, and obviously he would have been wearing one of these type of Victorian monocles. So fashion started to catch on, people wanted to wear them more, and obviously the Edwardians are inventors, so what do they come up with? They come up with galleries. So if you heard the word gallery, you might imagine somewhere you would go to look at artwork or something, but in the term of in monocle terms, it actually means these feet here, this bar that's at the bottom of the monocle here, on both sides, on the top and the bottom, we call a gallery. So you can see the difference between the predecessor and the one with galleries here. So straight and flat, and then you have basically the same frame, but it just has these feet on there. As you can see on this one, they're quite thin, but they're also quite tall. So what that enables you to do is you can instead put the bottom gallery at the bottom of your cheek, on your cheekbone here, the bottom of your orbit, and then you can slot it inside inside your brow bone here, right in the top of your orbit. So I can even move my eyebrows and the monocle won't fall out because it's actually inside the bone, whereas the other one before was holding onto my skin. So if I moved my face, the monocle would fall out. So what this meant was that you didn't just have to use a monocle for reading, you could use it for distance as well. You could use it just like a pair of glasses today. You could just walk around wearing it and it would be fine, it wouldn't fall out. Obviously if it did fall out, we've always got the lanyard and the chain to catch it. Now another type of monocle that was made, we call the rimless monocle. sometimes called the poor man's monocle. And essentially what that is it's just a lens on its own. So the top here has that same sort of serrated edge in order to hold it into your eye. And you would wear that exactly the same as you would with the galleryless Victorian monocle. You would just tilt it and pop it towards your nose, and nobody could really tell that you were wearing one. So the thing that's expensive about monocles is the metal, it's the frame. So this is gold plated. Obviously if you're poor you can't really afford that, but if you can afford a corrective lens, you can just wear that in your eye and nobody would notice. Famous people who have worn this, Fritz Lang for example, he wears one, and there are various German actors and German soldiers who also, German generals, officers who wore this kind of monocle because in the field you can't really wear glasses and run around, so you could just quickly pop your monocle in and read or see what you're trying to see and you'd be done. The only thing with this monocle is if it does fall out of your eye, it smashes on the floor. Some of them have a little hole punctured here and a lanyard attached so that they didn't fall out. Now, as I mentioned before, as they started to become fashion accessories, obviously people wanted different styles and different colours. So what you can find are these monocles, and they're still the same 9-carat gold-plated monocles as before, but what they have is a celluloid ring around the edge. So this one is imitation tortoise shell, and you can take this on and off. I'm not going to do it on camera because it's quite fragile. But that was just so that you could have some sort of, a different style, a different fashion. Now, you've probably seen loads of images of Hollywood stars and other men in the 30s and the 20s wearing these celluloid-rimmed gold glasses. Well, this is the monocle equivalent of that. So that monocle was about 1920s. If I take us back into the Victorian era, we have entirely celluloid monocles. So this one is made entirely from celluloid. Again, it's an imitation tortoise shell colour, and that does not have galleries. So that again would just sit in the orbit of the eye like this. The thing with these monocles is they were made very cheaply, and what came later, I can't really show you against my suit now, what came later were the Bakelite monocles. So these are made of Bakelite, which is an early sort of 30s plastic. And so these were also kind of like poor man's monocles. These were your ready readers, these were your off-the-shelf kind of monocles, because as you notice on both of these, there's no screw. You can't open up the frame, you can't change the lens. So that's why this one doesn't have a lens, because obviously at one point the lens would have smashed, and as any optician will tell you, it's going to be very hard to get a lens in a piece of plastic, especially as it's not a modern plastic that they can kind of heat and mess around with. If you were to take a celluloid monocle like this to the optician and he was like, oh, I can heat that up and I can put a lens in, you have to tell them that they're celluloid. If he puts any heat on this, this is going to combust. This is just going to set on fire. It's going to be a chemical fire. I took this to one optician. This actually has my lens in it, so I managed to squeeze my lens in. But what I ended up doing was breaking the frame, so it's been sort of cemented back together. But my optician said, I'm sorry, but I'm not even going to bother trying to do anything with that. I had a guy who brought some glasses in. They were made of celluloid. He didn't tell me. I heated them up to try and fit a lens in, and it set my shop on fire. So be very careful with the materials. So one problem with monocles, of course, is that they have a tendency to fall out. So obviously there's a lanyard, there's a chain to stop them hitting the floor. If your monocle's kind of falling out, you might squeeze it a little bit and go, oh, it's falling, try and keep it in. So the Edwardians were great inventors. They saw this problem and they came up with a solution. They said, why should the user have to squeeze to hold the monocle in? Why doesn't the monocle push back? And so they invented one of my favourite types of monocles, the sprung gallery. Now what does that mean? So you can see this monocle has a gallery, but it's actually a wire that goes all the way around the monocle, and it ends in these two handles here. So what you can do with this is, I don't know the best way to show you this, but you can compress the gallery, okay? So what you would do is you would compress the gallery. You wouldn't need to tilt it, you just put it straight in the orbit of your eye, and when you release, the gallery itself pushes against the orbit of your eye and holds itself in. So you can do way more things, and the monocle is kind of pushing against you so that it doesn't fall out. And obviously, if the orbit of your eye isn't that big, it won't expand and hurt you. It's not that strong. So what this meant was, before you had to get either a custom-made monocle or you had to get a monocle to a specific measurement. What this meant was this is kind of the any-man monocle. This is the any-size monocle. It doesn't matter what size the orbit of your eye is, because this monocle compresses and opens up to your size. So now this is kind of a gimmicky monocle. It's not as aesthetically pleasing because obviously you can see the handles. They weren't that popular, and subsequently they're very rare. They're very hard to come across, so I'm very lucky that I actually managed to find one. It's one of my favourite pieces in my collection. I don't use it very often because, again, it's not very aesthetically pleasing, but it's a wonderful piece, and it's a great bit of history, and it just shows that even with the smallest problems, they were always trying to innovate. Now, obviously, the monocles were popular way into the 30s, so here's a little bit of a later one. What you can see here is that the gallery is actually sloped, so it's bigger on one side, and then it goes smaller on the other side, and that's replicated on the other side. So the idea is you would need more of the gallery here and less here, because it's way deeper here. So you could fit the monocle closer into your eye, and then this wouldn't be pushing against your bone, because if it's the same size all around, oh, the screw just popped out. If it's the same size the whole way around, it will pop, it will push out. So the idea of that was that it would hold in straight. Now on some older monocles you can also see that replicated. So as you can see on this side, the gallery is straight, and if you look on the other side, the gallery is sloped. Now, people often say this is damaged, or the monocle is damaged, and so they've changed it like that. But I took a damaged monocle to my optician, this one here, and I asked him, you know, are you going to have to flatten it out like this one, because obviously the gallery here is broken. He was like, no, we would just solder it back on. We just weld that back to that. I didn't have him do it because it was kind of expensive, and I have loads of monocles. So this one has been chosen by the user, would have probably decided he wanted it to be slanted so that it didn't push against the bone here. So it slots in here. He has the full one on top to hold his eye for his eyebrow. He has just the one on the inside on the cheek, and then the outside doesn't have anything, so it sits a little bit nicer for them. Okay, so that's about every type of monocle I have in my collection. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the lanyards, the things that are used to hold monocles to your body. So obviously if you drop a monocle, if it falls out of your eye, you need something to catch it, because not only is this like a piece of nice jewellery, it's gold or other precious metals, it's also got a glass lens which is going to smash, and lenses are expensive. So one of the most common ones you see is the black string, and that is literally just a piece of black string that's tied at one end. And what you do with that is you take the folded end, not the tied end, and you push it through the loop of the monocle like that, and then you open it up, you bring it round, and you pull the tied end through, and then you've created a loop, and your monocle's secure. Now some of them have a bead like this. So when you wear the monocle, if you don't have that bead, you have these big wide strings, so they can sometimes be a little bit, you know, open, flamboyant, look a bit dumb. If you pull this bead down, you bring the strings together, and you can also tighten it around your neck so that you have a single cord, and it looks a little bit smarter. So the next thing we have is a ribbon. So these were used for kind of formal events in order to look smart, or just to look interesting. Obviously in the Victorian era they loved a big black ribbon to hold their glasses, their pince-nez and their monocles on, because it looked kind of flamboyant, kind of dandy. So again, it's the same principle. It has this bead on it, which is actually, in this case, is like a gold plated band, and you would just tighten that up. It's kind of difficult to do because this isn't really old, and I don't want to fray it. It's already started to fray. So basically you would pull this all the way up to your neck, and then you would just have this big black ribbon dangling down, and it would look very posh. That was the idea of that one. Sorry, I just coughed, so my eyes look a little bit watery now. The next thing you'd have is a chain. So this is just a static chain. You can see it probably broke at some point, and someone's attached a loop in the middle. And what this has is a clip on one end. So it's very simple. This one's silver. It's a little bit soft. It wouldn't really have been worn with a gold monocle, probably a silver or a celluloid monocle, something of a different colour. So you would just open this little clip up, and then you could attach it to your waistcoat or to your clothes somewhere, and it would just pinch on like that, and then you could happily wear your monocle, and if it fell out, the chain would hold it. That was the idea of that. Now sometimes when I get monocles, I get kind of makeshift chains. So I've got one here that it doesn't look like an antique chain at all, it's just a gold chain, and it has a paper clip on one end. So I've actually seen this on a few Victorian ones as well, where they've had a ribbon or a piece of string and it's been attached to a paper clip or a pin, and that would basically do the same thing as that last clip. It would just puncture the actual fabric. Then my favourite one of all the lanyards is the one I've been wearing through this whole video, you may have noticed. It's a retractable chain. So you can see here it has this enamel button here, and that has a pin going through the back of my lapel. And what that does is you can extend the chain out, and then when you stop pulling, it locks. So then you can wear your monocle and it's locked in there, and you have this really dainty, elegant looking chain. And when you're done with your monocle, what you can do is you give it a little tug, and it gets reeled right back in, and it can just dangle there. So this means you don't have to have it in a pocket. It means you don't have a string or a ribbon or a lanyard dangling around, getting caught in like your pocket watch or anything like that. You can just pull it out, you can wear it, and then when you're done, it simply goes straight back in. And it's perfect. Now, I wouldn't let it... In some of the movies, you see people release these very quickly, and they like go... That looks cool on movies, but in real life, you don't really want to do that. You can chip the enamel, or you can damage the frame, or you can even just ruin the whole mechanism. So make sure you take care of your antiques. Now, when buying monocles online, you might see things like these being sold as monocles. Now, I have seen a few chaps wearing these as monocles, and you know what? They're corrective lenses, and they're in a frame, and you can attach a lanyard to them, so if you want to wear these as monocles, that's absolutely fine, but they're not actually monocles. They're not intended to be worn by anybody. What these are optometrist tools. So, you know those big glasses that you would wear when your eyesight's being tested? These are the lenses that they would use. So these are actually handles where they would slot that in and see, and then they would test your eyesight, and then they would remove them. So these are not monocles. Don't be fooled into thinking that these are monocles when you buy them. These usually come as part of a set, but sometimes you can get them separately and they do look like monocles, but do not be fooled. And that's about all I have to tell you about monocles themselves. You may be wondering why I choose to wear a monocle. So I have astigmatism in just my left eye, which means that reading can be kind of difficult. If I wear reading glasses, then I've got two of the same lens on each eye, and now this eye is can't read very well. Now what I could do is I could go and get glasses with a plastic lens, as my optician offered me. He said, you can have one with the lens and one with the plastic lens. The thing is, it's so expensive, what's the point? And also, I dress like this, so I thought, well, I'm just going to go and wear a monocle, because why wouldn't I? And so I wear a monocle. So with the monocle, I can see things up close when they come up close, and because I've got this eye, I can still see the long distance if I look far away. And your brain kind of connects the dots and fixes the image for you, so I'm always seeing clear no matter what distance I'm looking. And that's perfect. So chefs use them, artists use them, even photographers use them. I've seen a few videos. So they're really versatile. I think they're wonderful. Now, in the modern world, you may think monocles are really outdated, which, you know, fair enough. Bowler hats are probably outdated too. I mean, I wouldn't know. The thing is, there are still companies making monocles, modern monocles. There are still opticians selling monocles. And my personal optician said he's probably been given about 50 monocles in recent times. So people are still wearing them. Actually, in my area, I noticed 2 other guys wearing monocles. So that makes 3 of us in just this small town. Now, one of my favourite companies, because they're such avid promoters of the monocle, which I really appreciate, and this isn't sponsored, they don't even know that I'm doing this, they don't even know who I am, but they're a company called Monocle Madness, and you get your monocle in this cool little shoe polish tin, essentially, and it looks like this. So it's completely modern, it's not an antique, it has this kind of stylized big thick loop, it's kind of like flat, so the screw is kind of hidden. It's very modern looking, and you get 2 lanyards, you get a black one and you get a blue one. And it's just a monocle. It's a monocle to use for the modern man. The only criticism I have is I don't like the lanyards. You can't move this bead. It's just a metal clip. You can't move, and also it's a bit thick. But these monocles are great, and I've used them a lot when I go to concerts and when I do gigs, or if I'm having to be busy and I don't want my monocles to get damaged, my antique ones, then I always wear a Monocle Madness one. So there are other companies that do this. There's another company called Nearsights that make these monocles. But I just really appreciate that there is a company out there, or some companies out there, who are still promoting monocles and who still think that they're viable. I think in the modern world, these are probably so apt, because when you're looking at your phone, you don't want to be getting glasses out, putting them on, and then looking at your phone. You could literally put your monocle on, look at your phone, drop your monocle, put your phone away. You know, rather than get reading glasses out. I see people wear reading glasses on their heads because when they get a text, they have to put them down, then they lose them or they fall off and break. So a monocle should make a comeback in the modern world. I know, like in 2014, there was like a monocle comeback, but it didn't really happen, did it? So let's bring the monocle back. So yeah, you can find monocles in market stalls, you can find them in antique shops, you can find them on eBay, you can find them online in great companies that still produce them, or even go to your local opticians and see if they have any. So what am I wearing today? So from the top, I'm wearing an Edwardian bowler hat from Moss Bros. This one's actually an equestrian hat, so it's very hard. And it has a string inside to tighten it. The collar I'm wearing here is a reproduction. This is from RJW Shirts. Very beautiful, very stiff reproduction collars that can be washed. Then I'm wearing an Edwardian clip-on bow tie. So this is what it looks like when it's off. This hooks over the stud and then these go under the collar to hold it up. I'm wearing a striped collarless shirt. I believe this one is probably late 20s or 30s. So, it's hard to see because I haven't got a good tripod, but I'm wearing a 1910s three-piece suit, 3-button jacket with peaked lapels here. I've got 2 buttons and a line going round for a cuff. If I stand on this chair, you can kind of see the bottom cuts away like this. So I'm wearing cufflinks and armbands on my shirt. I've got the belt back on the waistcoat, and obviously my trousers are fishtail, and they also have a belt back here. So it's 1910 style galore. I think that's all I have to tell you about monocles. So hopefully you know everything about monocles now. You know about all the different types of monocles that you can get. You know the history of monocles, and you know what a monocle is. And hopefully I've inspired you to go and buy one. I mean, you don't have to dress like me, but you can still go and wear a monocle and use a monocle. There are so many people out there who are still using them for everyday use, for all the different jobs that they do. So thank you very much for watching. Consider subscribing if you're interested in antiques and antique menswear and clothing history in general. So thank you very much. I still don't have a catchphrase, so the end.